There is a collector in the United States who has been collecting old marbles for many years.
C'è un collezionista negli Stati Uniti che ha collezionato marchi per molti anni.
And this is a photo from his website, but it shows a transition. These are all the different models that Martin makes. They do make a few more smaller ones, but this is most of the models that people consider to be pre-war Martins.
Questo è una...
Starting with...
L'avete capito questo?
Dreadnought.
No, delle tradurre perché...
Tutto, ok. Questa mostra tutte le varie forme delle chitarre che sono considerate pre-war, cioè gli strumenti che originariamente le forme che originariamente venivano fatte appunto prima della guerra.
So we have a Dreadnought OM, 12 fret triple O. That's a double O 12 fret. That's a single O, and that's a size 2, I believe.
Capito questo? Sì? Okay.
So my talk is basically about what is the Martin sound. These guitars all have slightly different sounds because of the body shape is largely responsible for shaping the tone.
La grande differenza, intanto per la differenza del suono, è data dalla forma.
So these are some of the guitars in my shop. And again, from a little parlor guitar to a double O, triple O. That's a slope shoulder Dreadnought, not a Martin. And this is a 12 fret Dreadnought. The thing I want you to notice about this picture is the bracing looks almost identical on all of them.
La cosa divertente è che l'incatenatura sembra esattamente uguale per tutte.
And here's some others. This is an OM. That's a 14 fret Dreadnought. That is a Gibson style Dreadnought. Again, the X-brace from this, viewing it this way, the layout, the pattern is the same.
L'incatenatura X in questa sembra la stessa.
The reason I wanted you to see that is very slight changes in where those braces go and how they're carved account for a great deal of variation in tonal possibilities.
In realtà bastano piccolissime differenze nel punto in cui per esempio l'X è stata posizionata e questo fa delle grosse differenze nel suono.
So if you have the X-brace here, typically, if you just move it back a little bit, it changes the sound quite a bit. Also, the shape of this brace and how large it is, and where you put these scoops, right here, where the peak is, it all plays a big part.
Ok?
In the voice.
Allora, dunque, naturalmente quello che ho detto prima, variando la posizione cambia molto e inoltre tutto variando anche il modo in cui viene scavata la catena. A seconda di dove quel picco, la parte iniziale, viene posizionato, cambia molto il suono.
This is a picture of my glue pot. That's granular hide glue, traditional glue for instrument making.
What do you buy? What do you buy this glue?
There's only one source for it in the United States. You can buy it from various suppliers, but it all comes from a place called Bjorn Industries.
Ah, okay.
They make all the hide glue, and then they ship it to other distributors. And there are different types of hide glue with different gram strength.
We use the one called Zurigo.
Yeah, and violin makers use a different one than we use because they want to be able to take the violin apart. Guitar makers, you do not want the bridge flying off the guitar.
Sì, diceva appunto, questa è la colla che usa, la colla in perla è quella che si usa appunto la colla a caldo, e parlavamo di diversi tipi di colle e i violinai usano colle leggermente diverse. Noi abbiamo bisogno di colle più tenaci perché noi abbiamo un problema di tensioni veramente più elevate.
Animali,
sono colle animali.
Tell me when it looks best.
Questo sta parlando però delle chitarre pre-war.
Quella che sta facendo lui, ma lui fa delle chitarre sostanzialmente più vicine possibili al pre-war.
The glue comes in little granules, and you soak it overnight. And some people think it's hard to use hide glue, but it's not once you get the hang of it. It's easy. I prefer it to other glues because it cleans up easily and it's nice. You just need to be careful. You get the consistency consistency to run off the brush nicely.
Sì, questa è una cosa tecnica. La colla a caldo viene messa durante la notte, si gonfia di acqua, si mette in acqua, poi si lavora e lui preferisce questa colla perché, contrariamente a quanti pensino effettivamente che c'è molta difficoltà nell'usarla perché bisogna evitare che la colla si raffreddi durante la lavorazione. In realtà se si fa bene, i pezzi sono caldi e soprattutto ha la possibilità di essere pulita in maniera molto bella. Tutte le altre colle quando lasciano le sbavature tirarle via diventa un problema, invece con l'acqua calda questa viene via facilmente, si pulisce molto bene.
The other reason for showing this is that a lot of people strongly believe that using hide glue is partly responsible for the traditional Martin sound. The pre-war sound, because that, in order to get that sound, you need to use the same materials they were using, the same types of wood, the same finish, the same glues, I think there is a difference in the sound of hide glue. I'm not saying it's better or worse, it just is a characteristic sound of the Martin guitar, so that's what I use.
La colla, molti pensano giustamente che la colla sia uno dei maggiori, l'uso della colla a caldo sia uno delle maggiori responsabili della qualità del suono delle vecchie Martin, delle pre-war. Diceva anche che appunto uno degli obiettivi è quello di cercare di usare esattamente le stesse cose, cioè gli stessi legni, la stessa colla, le stesse vernici. E una delle importanti sostiene sia la colla. Sono d'accordo.
This photo just is here because I just want to stress the importance of high quality top wood.
Sì, sta parlando adesso della qualità del legno per la tavola armonica.
Good stuff. Has to be very high quality. And that goes for all guitar building, not just Martin. But for Martin, the traditional sound comes from using red spruce. Although if you have other species of wood that have similar characteristics, because there's a great amount of variety in each species.
Are you talking about Adirondack? Red spruce in general?
Red spruce and Adirondack are the same.
Okay, the
Two
same.
different names for the same wood. So that's the traditional wood to use for the Martin sound. But if you use other species of wood, you can get very, very close if the wood has the same weight, the same stiffness, and similar characteristics. It can be very close.
Ok, dice che tutte le vecchie Martin del tempo precedente alla guerra appunto sono fatte in redwood, Adirondack, e questo abete rosso, sì, abete rosso in generale, sì. E dice se lo fate con quello funziona, però anche con altri legni basta che abbiano le stesse caratteristiche di rapporto fra leggerezza e rigidità, ottenete lo stesso risultato.
Solo per il top.
Per il top.
The other characteristic about red spruce that makes it ideal for the Martin sound is that it is moderately heavy. It is not overly complex. The overtones are there, but they're not as powerful as you would find in European spruce. And that's part of the Martin sound is heavy fundamental notes, not overly complex, what we call a dry sound.
Una delle caratteristiche dell'abete americano è che ha una grande fondamentale ma non ha grandissime armoniche, come invece ha l'abete europeo.
This is just a shot of the woods in the shop, just showing you that as guitar makers like to get as much wood as they can. You always buy the best you can find, and then you end up not using half of what you have.
Sì, esatto. Dice tutti gli utai comprano un sacco di legno, cercano di comprare sempre il meglio e poi alla fine usano sempre metà di quello che hanno comprato. Questa è una foto del suo laboratorio.
So here's the top just prior to bracing. And what I'm doing is I have a very bright light here, and I hold this up. Hold it here, and I look for defects. So,
Con quel modo lì trova le imperfezioni del legno.
and at this stage, just before putting braces on,
And you check it after you glue and put it together?
I check it before, but I'm also sometimes
Okay.
in the thicknessing of it.
something
you can
can
expose
happen.
something that you didn't see, and so I might hold it up to see try to gauge how deep it is. The other thing I'm doing at this stage is I'm doing the final thicknessing at the top, which is very, very important. The art of luthery, a lot of it takes place at this stage where you're determining how thick to make the top and matching that flexibility and weight with what you plan to do with the bracelet.
That can be done with great numbers of construction. Dice che appunto una cosa importante è determinare quando fermarsi con lo spessore, no? Per arrivare al corretto rapporto appunto fra peso e tra spessore ed elasticità.
Even at a factory like the Bourgeois factory, which makes 500 guitars a year, they still pay a lot of attention to how each top gets sanded individually. Now in a larger factory they don't do that, but at the smaller shops,
ancora da loro, anche da Dana, Bourgeois, molta attenzione posta nel momento in cui fanno la levigatura finale per arrivare esattamente al tipo di rigidità a cui che voglio. Do you all the same thickness, or you have different thickness on soundboard, on the same soundboard?
different thickness.
Different thickness.
Sometimes I'll leave it even.
Yeah.
Other times the wood, you get a section.
A section
that's
very stiff. So you.
What I look for is a fairly even flexibility. I don't want one section to be really stiff and the other floppy, and I flex it this way and that way. It's very important to also check stiffness
check
that way.
Do you take a reference for this?
This way and this way. Feel this very good. That way, very stiff.
Do you take reference for this?
Sometimes. I used to. I don't anymore. I kind of just do it by feel now. But years ago, I used to, use a weight and check flexibility, but I don't do it anymore.
Okay.
Not today.
No, it's
Quello che fa è provare la flessibilità del pezzo di legno, e se trova una sezione di venatura che rimane troppo rigida rispetto alle altre, allora lavorano esclusivamente su quella per arrivare a uniformità di. But don't you think that a difference in the stiffness of the soundboard may affect positively the character of the sound?
Yeah.
So your goal is to have the same sound on every soundboard?
No.
Or you expect a different one?
Sometimes, depending on the way the top is flexing, I may take material away just from this center area right here.
Yeah.
Other times I'm taking material away from the outer edge. It kind of depends on what the top is.
Only for and you look only for the right stiffness. Don't you have top tuning? Don't you?
Not that much. I mean, I do, but I found over time, after doing this for years and years, you talk to a lot of luthiers, they say the same thing. The tapping
And what is on modes, vibrations? Okay.
I don't build that way. There are lots of people who are excellent builders who do that. But what I do is, when I have the body completely constructed, the neck is not on it.
Okay.
And I tap the top.
Yeah.
I leave my finger on the top and feel the vibrations. I'm not listening. I'm not hearing it. I'm listening with my fingertip for the vibrations. This is the most important thing I do as a builder.
So you feel the flexibility of
yes.
Okay.
And it's not just how much it flexes. I also do this.
Yeah.
Push down on it. But when I do this, I'm hearing with my fingertip how fast the vibrations are and how much vibration there is.
Abbiamo detto un sacco di cose, forse. Allora, dove eravamo rimasti?
Lo spessore variato.
Sì, lo spessore variato, e appunto avete visto che a volte tocca lo spessore. Io gli ho chiesto se fa questa cosa cercando soltanto di lavorare sulla sensazione di flessibilità della tavola, oppure se lavora anche col tap tuning, cioè quella tecnica che prevede di tenere la tavola, batterla e sentire fino a che e lavorare lo spessore fino a sentire il punto in cui la vibrazione è più libera possibile. Oppure un altro sistema che consiste nel lavorare sui modi, cioè la tavola armonica si chiamano in italiano cuscini d'accoppiamento, cioè delle frequenze su cui si accoppiano, come la corda ha dei fusi, la tavola armonica ha delle aree che si gonfiano e si sgonfiano. Lavorando su quelle si riesce in qualche modo a migliorare l'efficienza dello strumento. In realtà si riesce sempre a lavorare soltanto sul primo modo e sul secondo modo, cioè sul movimento totale della tavola armonica e al massimo sul suo primo armonico, che è quello diviso in cui la tavola fa questo movimento. Per cui uno così, e il terzo che invece pensate a una tavola tagliata a croce, questi sono i due più, questi sono i due meno, così e così. No? Lui dice che in questo modo non lavora, preferisce lavorare invece sullo strumento finito e con la punta del dito picchietta la tavola per sentire non tanto la flessibilità quanto la sua capacità di essere messa in vibrazione, e questa cosa la sente con la sensibilità del polpastrello.
Potrebbe chiedere
Sì.
una cosa. Ieri un altro liutaio diceva che praticamente tiene lo spessore, diciamo, sul verticale, non so come dire, cioè diciamo rispetto al manico, ha uno spessore, diciamo, verso le corde più basse, dunque più spesso,
più sottile,
più
invece
sottile.
verso le corde più sottili
Sì.
più spesso.
È un discorso di frequenze, per esaltare o meno il discorso della tonalità sulle frequenze.
Sì. La domanda
Anche
è:
lui adotta questo.
If you use different thicknesses on the soundboard for basses and trebles.
Not so much. I leave it fairly symmetrical. I know people who do that, but I'm more concerned with the amount of flexibility at the top, and most importantly,
I agree.
the character of the vibration. And often, one of the things that new builders do is they try to build everything so delicately to make the guitar so responsive that it's very hard to control that kind of building. It's a better plan, I think, to build a little bit tight and then adjust after the body is together. That's why this is so important to me. Is doing this after I make the body. I'm not done voicing the guitar. I do the vibrations, and if I don't like what I hear, I can either make a decision to take some material off here and here, or all the way around, or just in this area, or even the entire thing, based on what I'm getting here in different areas of flexibility.
Sì. Lui preferisce lavorare appunto sulla flessibilità e piuttosto lascia la tavola leggermente più spessa e lavora poi eventualmente ai lati per lavorare. Dice che non crede alla possibilità che questo possa in qualche modo aiutare. Dice molti liutai lo fanno.
Comunque praticamente la parte esterna è più fine, mentre la parte
Non è detto, però può essere più fine.
cioè dipende da.
Chi è che parlava delle due parti?
Dunque era.
Non si dice.
Siamo in un luogo pubblico. Mica ne ricordo.
Che ha trovato
Cosa fa? Brindolo.
Esatto, bravo, correggere.
No, per capire.
Suppongo che sì. When you work only with taking away material after the guitar is finished, it's a complete.
C'è una regola.
Yes, well, it's hard to add material, but that's why I tend to build a little bit on the heavy side, then make adjustments.
Preferisce fare più grosso e poi tirar via.
In other words, if you're going, you try your best to assess the wood.
Don't you work on the brace?
Rarely. I've only done it twice in my
Ha
career.
fatto solo un paio di volte in vita sua di lavorare con
Almost never. Yeah. And if I get a guitar and I feel it's a little tight,
io lo faccio
Io
spesso.
faccio il contrario.
when I string it up and it feels tight, I think the best thing to do at that stage is to wait a year or so and then reassess the guitar.
In my experience, and it too,
The opposite.
I find more gold in shaping again the bracing rather than taking away the material from the soundboard. I would.
Why? Because I make many more classical guitar than acoustic guitar. And on classic guitar, it's impossible to take away wood on extra.
Yes.
Because it's very.
It's so thin already. Yeah, it's very different. Very different. Well, I only do that at the stage where I have a body that has no finish on it, no neck on it. You know, so that's when I'm tapping it, flexing it, and then I can take a little bit off. When I say I'm taking material off, we're talking about 0.2 millimeters, something like that. It's very, very little material can make a big difference, and you have to keep checking by tapping and flexing, and it's amazing. Sometimes you grinding away, nothing happens, and then suddenly you do a tiny bit more, and the thing comes alive.
Yeah, but with sandpaper.
I do with a sander.
Sander.
Yeah. Orbital sander. It's safer. You don't get any tear out, and it keeps everything nice and even. And I can control it very close to where I'm doing my work. It's not hard once you know. I think as an artist of the orbital sander.
Per fare questo uso una.
You do this job with the binding is on.
L'artista della dedicatrice.
Before binding, and I get back to what you said about listening. When I'm buying wood, I mostly do it out of flexibility. But when I pick a top for a specific guitar, then I do this. Because certain customers want a guitar with a lot of complexity, certain customers want a guitar with a strong fundamental, and 10 red spruce tops are all going to have slightly different characteristics.
Ok, questo è importante. Quando c'è un cliente che gli chiede una chitarra con molta fondamentale piuttosto che con tanta ricchezza di suono, lui sceglie la tavola armonica sentendo la voce originariamente.
Okay, great.
But you need every top, row top, is the same shape and the same thickness.
I try to do that because it's much easier to evaluate.
To compare.
It doesn't always work that way, especially when you buy red spruce. Often it does not come this way. It comes with pieces
it's
cut
very
out.
difficult. Yes.
Very hard to evaluate. But fortunately, red spruce is very consistent. If it's quarter sawn, it's fairly consistent. This shows a dish that has a 25-foot radius in it.
This is a soundboard.
For the soundboard, yes.
È quella che viene chiamata, scusa, in spagnolo la solera, cioè il piano su cui viene realizzata la tavola armonica ha un radius ha una scavatura con radius di 25 pollici. Sapete il radius come sono le tastiere, no?
Here is that dish. There's a top in it with an X brace glued to it. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the amount of filming in there. 25-foot radius. There's a big debate among Martin historians as to how Martin glued tops and backs on and how they arched their tops. If we have time after this, I can go into more detail about that.
C'è un grande dibattito su come fossero fatte effettivamente le tavole armoniche nell'epoca pre-war, se avessero della bombatura o no o meno, o come lo facessero.
It's not true that all the Martin are right.
Martin did not build in a dish like that, as far as we know. They would curve their braces, you can see.
Okay.
The brace is curved.
Okay.
It has that arching in it. But they would glue it flat. They would force the brace flat. And then the wood would...
So it's the brace that forces the soundboard.
Yeah, I think that's how they did it. I glued most of my braces in that dish.
Like Torres did.
Yeah.
Avete capito?
Il
Sì.
convesso deve...
Lui lavora con la valvatore, cioè facendo la solera bombata, mettendo su le catene in modo tale che funzionino come i cementi precompressi, no? Incollandolo così, quando tu lo togli dalla solera rimane così. Invece molto volentieri le vecchie Martin venivano incollate piatte, lavorando la catena arrotondata e poi incollandogliela in modo tale che quando mollavano le cose la catena tirava sui.
La raggiatura era di 25 pollici.
Quella che fa lui è 25 pollici, sì.
I use,
Mi sembra di più a occhio però.
this is how I glue my braces down. There are springs inside here, lots of pressure.
Il modo in cui incolla le catene sulla tavola.
Lots of people are using a vacuum clamping system now, but for hide glue, I like this because I can
Control why gluing, yeah.
and I can glue a brace, and then I can glue another brace, and then I can glue another
Yeah.
brace. It's not locked in the press for
You
an
can't.
hour.
With
Yeah.
hide glue you can't.
Yeah. This is 1945 D18, I believe. You can see the braces are not scalloped
Questa è una di 18 e 45.
like this. No
Erano
scallop.
fatte abbastanza col culo.
And
Lui
very,
le apre.
the braces
No, questa è fatta
are
la
round
fotografia
also.
dall'interno.
It's not like this. It's not like that. It's round.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that. This is late 45 0018. It's a smaller brace, not quite as tall, but the same thing. No scallop by 1945 or late 45.
I think they were mounted straight and then shaped after.
Yeah, yeah. This is, I believe, let me see what we got here. That's probably, I think that's a 1930 OM. You can see how severe
Una
it is.
orchestra model del 30.
This, very, very low in here. And you can also see the peak. This takes place right where the bridge patch is. You know, where this is.
And the thickness of the bracing is guitar?
I believe it's quarter inch. On the
No,
small
quarter, yeah.
guitars, it's quarter inch.
Quarter
Then they went to 5/16.
76 cm.
Yeah.
Questo è lo spessore di un quarto di pollice. Mentre sulla cosa 7.
Here,
Lo spessore delle catene.
the scallop on this
Sai che
one,
Martin fa due tipi di spessore, uno più largo e uno più stretto.
not quite as low as on the OM. You know, so there's a lot of variation. And Martin at that time paid a lot of attention, even though their bracing was evolving a lot from 1929 to 1945, which is considered the classic pre-war period. Their bracing evolved quite a bit, especially between the early 30s and 1937, when they started to make larger braces and they left the top sticker. And so Martin collectors pay a lot of attention to which year the guitar was made.
Perché cambia molto, perché a un certo punto hanno cominciato a fare le catene più larghe e le tavole più spesse.
Ok, invece se lo curva o se lo mette diritto.
Do you force the bridge blade too? Yeah.
I do not, Martin, for a while, they cut into the brace.
Into the brace.
Yes, they cut into the brace and they would put the bridge
Sure.
plate underneath it. Oh yes, there's a picture here.
Lì si vede una specie di...
Look at that. See right there?
It seems that the braces are not quartz sewn too.
Yeah, they didn't pay that much attention.
Non
You
è
know,
così.
it's off a little bit, you know. And look at that. I don't do that. I think that's, it weakens the brace. And I don't think it was necessary.
No, non credo. Cioè, sicuramente la Martin no, magari lui avendo la solera bombata comunque quando glielo incolla un po' rimane. Cioè. Someone work with the radius behind, in front of the bridge and straight rear the bridge. Something. I suppose Larry Bell do it this way.
Yes.
Other-
Yeah. one other thing that the Martin people talk about a lot is the fact that there's a maple bridge plate here instead of rosewood. I don't believe that plays a very strong role in sound, although a lot of people say, oh, I had a rosewood bridge plate, I took it out and put a maple one, and the guitar's a million times better. I had an opportunity to work building in this style when I was working for Schoenberg. And we built almost all rosewood plates, and then we switched to maple, and we thought, oh, we're going to hear a difference. We couldn't hear any difference.
Molta gente si fa la menata del fatto che il bridge plate sia in palissandro piuttosto che in acero, e lui dice che nella sua esperienza ne ha provato tutte e due le soluzioni, non c'è sia una grande differenza.
The size of the bridge plate does affect.
Mentre la dimensione del bridge plate.
And there are a lot of modern builders who are playing with large bridge plates or small bridge plates and really helping create an individual voice. So that is important, but the material is not that important in the sound, as long as the size is correct.
Yeah, I saw many soundboard completely banded by the traction of the strings, and so many people put the larger pad to.
Yeah, I personally would use a larger X brace rather than a larger bridge plate for that. For my sound, that's the sound I like. So this is one of my guitars with the X brace on. You can see it. The X brace is just like this when it gets glued on. It's been machined, but there's a fair amount of work to do on it still. It's not done.
You work is that the same grade that Martin do?
Yeah, and that's part of the Martin sound too. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's quite wide. It's it's quite wide. It's not like this. It really, part of the Martin sound is the fact that this is at that angle. Yeah. If you change it, if you make it a little more like this, you can really get a different sound.
Capito questo?
No.
Che gran parte del suono del Martin è dato dal fatto che questo angolo è così largo. Se tu cambi quell'angolo lì, il suono cambia tantissimo.
Ma lui ha un angolo comunque al quale si attiene.
Sì, è quello Martin. You play with the same angle as Martin.
Yeah.
Okay. Lui sa
stesso. This is about 80 degrees or 110 degrees. Roughly.
In Gibson factory they used to change.
Yeah, all over the place.
Yeah. Alla Gibson invece cambiavano, era il modo con cui cambiavano il suono, cioè tra una Southern Jumbo e una J45 la differenza è fondamentalmente la cosa.
So here's a guitar with the braces have been glued on. I still need to do a lot of carving. I just wanted to see how it starts out. And then I do a lot of initial carving. And then I start doing some tapping. But I've found over the years that tapping at that stage is not that useful. What you're hearing. What's more important is to assess the top before you brace it, and then make your decisions there on what you're going to do. And that's something you can only learn with experience. But actually tapping the top, you have this loose plate that is not attached to a guitar yet, and it's not under string tension. So, maybe if you are very, very studious about it, you can learn from it. And Dana Bourgeois, who I studied with, used to do that all the time. But even he, after the years, sort of doesn't really do it.
Dana told me that he preferred to do the tap tuning when the sides are on.
Yes, I think that's the way to go. That's what he evolved into that. He doesn't do that at the factory anymore, but when he was building for himself, that's what he did. He would glue the top to the sides and then do the final brace carving.
Può spiegare. Lui non sostiene che a questo punto c'è molto lavoro da fare sulle catene, ma non crede che a questo punto della lavorazione il tap tuning sia molto importante, perché quello che è stato fatto sullo spessore fondamentalmente. Avevo sentito appunto da Dana Bourgeois invece una volta che anche lui aveva la stessa idea, naturalmente essendo dalla stessa scuola, e che Dana preferiva fare il tap tuning con le fasce montate, perché questo gli dava un'idea più precisa di quello che sarebbe stato il comportamento della cassa
questo tape...
Il tap tuning, quello che abbiamo fatto prima con la tavola armonica, cioè si ascolta, si batte, si prende la tavola armonica in un punto nodale, cioè ci sono dei punti, si chiamano hotspot, dove tu prendi e la tavola ha un punto nodale, mettendo in vibrazione comincia a vibrare e tu senti la voce che ha, no? E variando, se tu usi sempre lo stesso spot quando la tieni e variando gli spessori, cerchi di capire lavorando quando smettere. In realtà quello che si dice non sai esattamente cosa cercare, perché cosa cerchi? Cerchi un suono che vibra di più, un suono che ha più armoniche, un suono che ha più fondamentale, e poi non sei sicuro che quella cosa lì, una volta che è legata alle fasce, abbia lo stesso effetto. Magari rischi di ottenere un effetto magari esattamente contrario, so. Ti sembra che vibri tanto e poi la chitarra diventa mollacciona, perché in realtà
Cioè lui succede questo, che poi le aspettative vengono...
no, lui dice che ha capito con l'esperienza che in questo momento qui il tap tuning non serve.
This is just a nearly complete OM. It's got a 1/4-inch X brace. This is a traditional Martin voicing with the peak of the X fairly close to the bridge plate and very, very slender tone bars. And just also shows you that when I do all the braces on, even though I've done a lot of shaping, there's still a lot of work to do.
E questa è molto tradizionale, con il picco della catena molto vicino al bridge pad, al sottoponte, non mi ricordo già più cosa è. Niente, sostanzialmente è molto vicino a Martin.
Pardon?
The same shape for the two.
Tone bar? I change it all the time, depending on how flexible I thought the top was.
But the shape?
The shape?
The shape?
Yeah, I change that too. I start with the Martin pattern, which is just 2 peaks, but I play with where those peaks are or how strong I want them to be. Often
But they can be different between them?
Yeah, sometimes I change the angle a little bit.
Oh.
I'll move the angle a little bit if I feel like
And the one near the bridge is bigger than the other?
Generally, yeah. Especially down in this corner because you have an end block here.
Yeah,
This block can keep things very, very tight.
I do the
there.
same, yeah.
And also right in here, you have the X and this one.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
So that peak, depending on
Okay.
how flexible, and I do flex these areas a
Very
little bit
important.
when I'm shaping these finger braces. I do a little flexing there.
That's very important. The hair is critical.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially on dreadnought.
A lot of people go too light in this
Yeah.
area. I think it's a mistake a lot of new builders make, is they take too much material off.
Yes, and the sound will lose resilience.
Yeah.
It's sunken down.
Yeah. Just another view.
Cambia anche quella forma delle due catene viene cambiata, a volte cambia addirittura l'angolo, quella vicino al ponte spesso è un po' più grossa, più fine, cioè su quelle abbiamo chiamate le tone bar, lui lavora moltissimo e dicevamo appunto che anche quelle due laterali, che per molti guitarristi ritengono quasi inutili, tanto che molti addirittura non le fanno, e invece lui dà molta importanza e lavora su quella zona lì cercando di dare un pochino più di robustezza.
On fingerstyle guitars, the end of the X brace, but critically these two, I leave about a little over a 1/16 of an inch. Let me see how many.
Un sedicesimo di
Maybe
inch.
1.8 millimeters.
Ok.
Something like that, and a little taller for dreadnoughts.
Un millimetro e otto.
This can really affect the sound of the guitars. It's how thick this area is left. These are oversized now. They get finished off later. But how thick this area is as it lets in to the side can really help voice the guitar.
On dreadnought.
On both. I leave it a little thicker on a dreadnought. Otherwise, your dreadnoughts can have a little too much complexity. At least I built for the bluegrass community, and they want a very tight guitar. So, not only is the X brace larger, here you have I have 3 X braces here. This is a dreadnought X brace. It's taller, scooping is
La prima è per una dreadnought, ho capito. La prima, questa è più grossa è per le dreadnought.
It's thicker, and if you flex this, don't flex it right here where the notch is.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Break, but if you try to flex this, very, very stiff, and you can compare it to these other braces. So there's an dreadnought X brace. This is a traditional Martin OM X brace, and this is a more modern version that this brace is on this guitar. It's a slightly taller X brace, still quarter
Narrow.
inch. And
Says
the
quarter
peak is a little bit further back, which gives it a slightly more modern sound. This one will give you a traditional Martin fundamental, very sweet sound, woody, not quite as loud as this one. This is a slightly more modern sounding guitar, which is what a lot of people, my customers, even though they want somebody who builds in the Martin tradition, they may want something that is a little faster response.
Ci sei?
Sì.
So you guys can take a look at those.
Discorso di suono
But
dolce.
various, and I will shape these braces more. They're just rough shaped right now. But this is what I start out with on the more modern ones, and you know I can. It gives me a little bit of room to move the peak this way or that way. So
You cut with CNC?
no, just holding the brace in a fixture and then running against a router. The jig that I use to create this, there's a bunch. The first one I do is make it the proper thickness.
Yeah.
Second one, route
The
this
radius,
surface. Then I put it in and push it in a jig. Push that down. Oh, no. I take that back. Then I want to shape this. So I do that one, then this one. Then I push it down.
By hand?
And, no, I have a fixture that holds it down.
Okay.
And it's in a frame, and it's held at a slight angle, and then I run it against a router
Okay.
that has a little notch here so that it doesn't get
Okay.
And then I flip it over, separate jig. It's 5 operations plus the notching, and Dana Bourgeois came up with that.
How many guitars do you make it here?
A little under 20.
Oh.
So, but it's nice to do this
Quite a lot.
because one of the reasons to appreciate the X brace especially is it just gives you consistency. It's a good starting point for evaluating the guitar. So now I do a lot of hand shaping, as you can see. There's a lot of stuff going on there, even after this. But I like the fact that these are the same. Everyone is the same, and I can have a good starting point. Whereas if it's just a rectangle, I think I would be a little bit less consistent. I mean, after you do it a long time, you get good, but still it's nice to have a lot of the work done to the same place every time. So these are
Antenna 2 work this way,
He was the one who came up with this fixture way back in the 1980s. He designed some nice tools for making bracing. And they're very basic, very basic. Anybody can make them. So it's good for me because I'm in a small shop and I was able to take some of those fixtures that I learned, that I used at the Bourgeois factory. I could use them in my own shop. They were not very sophisticated. This is one of the...
No, parliamo del fatto che appunto lui fa queste catene, se le fa da solo sostanzialmente, lavorando un po' con la fresa, e gli chiedevo quante chitarre fa, e l'anno ne fa circa 120. E anche 20? No, 120.
Pardon?
How many guitars do you make here? 100?
No, just 20.
20? Ah, 20. No, ho capito male.
Lui lavora da solo,
For
penso.
a hand builder, 20 is a lot.
Okay.
Uno al mese.
I do know people who make more, but I know a lot of people make maybe 10 to 15 a year. So,
No, l'ho capito male.
Quindi 12 all'anno.
this picture,
No, dicevo appunto che
20 all'anno.
No, ho capito 120.
this is what the bracing looks like on this guitar. It has the taller scallop. It's not as severe, and the peak is out fairly close to the edge. Now, when I do that, sometimes I may thin the top a little bit more so that the guitar isn't too tight. But it does change the characteristic of the sound. It's a little bit less modern, or a little bit less
Cioè,
modern.
hai capito? Sposta leggermente il punto del picco per rendere la chitarra più o meno libera. Lui prima diceva che preferisce lavorare con le catene già prelavorate come Fadena per avere un punto di partenza uguale per tutte. Poi dice comunque, avete visto quanti truccioli ci sono, le lavora molto comunque alla fine. Non si ferma alla catena precostituita e l'attacca su.
Alla fine. Ma di questi 20 suonano più o meno tutti uguali?
Eh no.
quindi va anche a fortuna.
E poi fa di differenti modelli, suppongo.
If I get a request for a Martin style guitar with a European spruce top, I often use that X-Brace because it's a little bit stronger and it really works
Your
well.
spruce is a little bit stronger than
The European spruce, if I have a European spruce guitar, I will use this. This X-Brace is a little stronger than the other one I showed you. This is a slightly larger X-Brace, which I combine with the European spruce because it's not as strong. And
Is it not so strong?
often, it depends on the time, but sometimes I have the request to use a lightweight European spruce. Not like this stuff, but lighter weight, a little more flexible. So I compensate for that flexibility and lightness with a slightly bigger X-Brace.
I knew that some Martins 45 style
Yeah.
were done with the soundboard in German spruce because they import from German.
That's what I've heard. I've also heard that that may not be true. It's hard to say. I have heard both, that they did use some European for those guitars, although I have seen some that were absolutely red spruce. Some of them are so clean and nice looking, it's hard to tell. I don't know, I'm not an authority on that, but I've heard from people who have really studied that there's different opinions. I know Dana did talk to C.F. Martin III when he was still there and asked him about that, and he said he didn't remember if they did that, but he said they did definitely use Engelmann spruce around 1953. They started using a fair amount of Engelmann because they had trouble getting Sitka.
Yes, that's it.
And then they went back to Sitka. So it was only for 1 or 2 years around 1953 that they did use some
They
Engelmann.
made a research on the billet of purchasing.
Yeah, right. They've done all sorts of research. I can't remember what the end
But
of the story was.
someone told me that sometimes they use German spruce that they import directly from Martin and from the area of guitar maker and violin maker in Germany.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Perhaps only on the 45 style.
Right,
style.
right. And some of those do look like European spruce. And some of them look
Also,
almost
overtones
absolutely.
are similar to the German spruce.
If you get the right stuff, this stuff is very close to red spruce, which is why I bought it. Because I'm familiar with it, and it's really good quality wood, and it may have a slight amount more complexity, but if you get the right pieces, it's fairly heavy for European spruce, but it's almost identical to red spruce. But it's better looking, generally. It's more consistent grading.
A un certo punto Martin ha spostato la catenatura, adesso non mi ricordo se in avanti o indietro.
Sì.
Per che motivo? Cioè, prima della guerra era una maniera, poi l'hanno spostata.
Beh, tanto il fatto che hanno cominciato a usare le corde pesantissime negli anni
no,
50.
dopo, già per guardare in acciaio.
No, ma è che le corde sono diventate anche più pesanti dopo, cioè hanno cominciato a utilizzare le 13 e le 14 e quindi le tavole si piegavano, hanno dovuto cominciare a spostare indietro l'incatenatura e mettere il ponte più robusto, il sottoponte più robusto. In realtà quello è un altro dei problemi grossi, cioè tutto questo discorso lo facciamo, ma dobbiamo tenere presente anche che corde usavano. We have to take care in our mind that the use of the gauge of the strings, because
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that you learn as you build a bunch of guitars is that the string tension is extremely important. You have to build to a specific string tension. Absolutely. And if you just take your
and in the
guitar,
history of the guitar, of the Martin guitars, they change often the bracing because of the gauge of the string.
absolutely, that's what I call the evolution from 1927 to 1945, and then 1950 is really them adapting to different strings and different use. Yeah, very, very, very important. And in fact, I'm on a little bit of a crusade. There are a lot of people who collect Martins from the 1850s, 1860s, 18s, up to the turn of the century, and they put very light gauge steel strings on them.
It doesn't sound.
No, put nylon strings on it. It's a beautiful instrument. I absolutely love it with nylon strings. It's not a Torres style classical guitar, but it has a unique voice. It's wonderful.
I always make this example. You think of a trampoline. If you put a light trampoline with a heavy person on, it couldn't vibrate because the heavy of the guy was on. If you put a very stiff trampoline with a light person, it wouldn't vibrate because it's too light. So it's the same with the guitar.
Exactly. You need to find
to find the right.
Yeah. So I put this picture in just because that's my daughter's signature. She and I made this guitar last year, and we sold it here in Sarzana.
Was that the maple one?
No, that went to Paolo Finelli.
Yes,
The
I
other
remember.
It was an Asian rosewood, like a light colored rosewood, Paolo rosewood. Very loud guitar, extremely loud, double up, great guitar. Just another shot of the Go Bar neck and Parker back braces there. Just to give you an impression of the Martin style back bracing. This is 3/4 of an inch wide. These ones are either a 1/4 inch or 16.
Capite questo? Sì, le misure. Quelle sono 1/4 di pollice e quelle sono invece, le altre sono un pochino più strette, sì. Cioè, sono come le vecchie Martin. Le Martin ne fanno tutte lo stesso spessore, invece fino agli anni 80 erano fatte così.
That's just another view. There's a lot of debate among guys who build this style as to how Martin shaped their backs. I do a dish just like I do my tops. That's how I build. That's not traditionally how Martin builds. And then I use that dish to help shape the sides before I glue the back on. That's not a shape. I use a dish of what they call a bowl sander.
But the back and the top are the same.
No,
The same rate.
No, they're different. But traditionally, Martin used a series of different radii on the back braces to create the arching. It's not a bowl, it's not a dome shape. It's more of a vault. It goes this way, not that way. And it does make a difference, but it's not as
Recently
important as the top.
they have the
Yes. Yeah, that's how everybody does it now. Just because it's so much easier.
The last phrase?
Oh, the dome?
No.
Bowl sanding. You take this dish, you put sandpaper in it, and then it spins around. And it shapes the kerfing. And I'll show you that in a second. It's coming up. There'll be a little bit more about that in a second. But the important thing is the shape of the back does help determine how flexible the back is when you tap it. And so for small guitars, fingerstyle guitars, I use a fairly flat shape. For a dreadnought, I don't want flexibility in the back at all. I want a tight back because you don't want complexity. So I use a tighter arch.
Capito questo?
And thicker. Back thicker.
Utilizza questo disco per dare la bombatura, il doming, cioè è proprio a cupola, no? E fa sulle chitarre piccoline, cerca un po' di flessibilità, quindi le fa quasi piatte. Invece sulle dreadnought non vuole flessibilità sul fondo e quindi le fa molto molto bombate.
If you tap old Martins, obviously, watch out for fingernails.
Yeah.
But if you tap the back of an old Martin, I noticed I was tapping new guitars, and then I tapped some vintage guitars, and the backs had a lot more movement.
vintage?
Yeah, on an old part in the back,
Okay.
a lot of vibration. Even though the braces are fairly large. And part of that has to do with the way they're shaped. You know, there's not a lot of arching that stiffens it up. And I think, I'm not sure what effect that is having on the sound of the guitar. I know it's not as important as the top, but it does play a role in the way the top and the back vibrate.
Yeah.
You know, they work together, and it seems to me that you get a nice low end in a small guitar if the back is open. However, there are some amazing classical guitar makers who are building really rich sounding guitars, and the backs are very rigid. So, you know, there are different ways to make the guitar work. That's just
what you obtain is to lower the fundamental elements of the guitar.
Yeah.
So you have less volume but more sweetness in the sound.
Yeah, right.
If you do a very stiff back, you have more volume, but
Right.
the sound more nasal, more.
It can, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
At which humidity you put together your guitar?
Well, this is something I learned the hard way. Billy Hanks, the master builder in Europe, has done a lot of research on this, and it seemed that I just kind of stumbled across the right method by accident. I was working for Julius Borges and Eric Schoenberg, and we were in this shop space where we could not control the humidity very well. And the guitars kept sinking with low humidity in the winter time. The guitars would sink and crack.
Great, yes.
So we thought we will build with lower humidity.
Because of your names, I suppose a very, very dry place.
Yeah, but what I found works best is to do the bracing at very low humidity. I get around 35%.
Okay.
But then when I join the top and the back to the sides, it's not 35%, it's 45%. And I had an opportunity to test whether that really, really works. When I had some guitars that I had built in my shop, they were at the Bourgeois factory because I was using their spray roof. In the winter, they had a failure of their humidity system.
Other brakes break.
And all of Dana's guitars went, and mine stayed, they sunk, but they stayed nicely shaped.
Fundamental.
Yeah. And you have to be very careful.
So 35% for the back and 45 for
No, 35 for the top and
the
back.
top and back, okay.
But
and 45.
when I brace them.
Okay.
But when I join the top and back,
35 tra.
For the 35
when the
45.
top and back and joined to the sides, then it's at 45%. So it has swelled just a little bit. And you don't want them to be too radical. Because then you can get a ballooned top and you have to cock your neck back. You have to
And the brace is detached from the.
Yes.
from the wood, yeah.
So I do it drier for the bracing.
Capito? No, ok. Sta parlando del fatto che appunto delle bombature e di come la bombatura ha effetto, no? Stiamo discutendo su questo. Io sostenevo questa cosa che se il fondo è poco bombato e vibra molto, tu abbassi l'intonazione dell'elmos dello strumento, cioè l'intonazione generale dello strumento si abbassa, quindi tu hai meno volume, però il suono diventa molto più dolce, più caldo, più gradevole. Molti costruttori oggi fanno il fondo molto spesso e rigido per avere più proiezione, anche se a costo di rendere il suono un po' più nasale, un po' più. E poi gli chiedevo a che umidità lui assembla gli strumenti, perché è una cosa importante, no? Normalmente quasi tutti i fabbricanti di strumenti musicali, quelli seri, dichiarano l'umidità in cui assemblano lo strumento, non so,
45.
sì, Martin dice 50, Taylor sono 47, la Rivet dichiara 45 e lui dice invece che fa le fasce del fondo le assembla tra il 35 e il 45, quindi con un grado di sicurezza molto elevato sulla possibilità che possono affondare, e poi dice monta invece le fasce sul 45 in modo tale che quando poi lo strumento asciuga fascia e fondo, tavola e fondo sgonfiano leggermente e riesce a ottenere questo equilibrio che la rende salva anche da possibilità che, non so, se vai in un negozio dove c'è molto secco, lo strumento possa